Well, welcome back to The Middle of Culture. This is episode 10. I am one of your regular hosts, Peter.
And I am your other regular host, Braden Jones. I said the last name this time.
I could tell you were waiting for me to say it, so I thought I'd psych you out a little bit by not saying it.
You did. You got me.
Well, you know, I like to be unpredictable that way, such is the life of an adventurous amateur podcaster as myself. Adventure is always ready.
You got to get the adventure where you can in these days.
It's so true, because it's definitely not happening in things like work and stuff like that, but you know.
Indeed, it is not.
So I don't want to start us out on a bummer of a note, but personally, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say this, just to kind of throw this out there. A little public service announcement. Braden doesn't know what I'm going to say. But I did want to briefly mention on the sad announcement that I saw today that Trevor Strnad, the vocalist for American death metal band The Black Dahlia Murder, passed away today at his own hand. He had been rather open about his struggles with depression a year or so ago, and sadly it looks like the disease continued to plague him and unfortunately took him from us today. And I just want to say that, you know, there's help out there, and I hope that if anybody hears this and is struggling with mental health issues and such, please seek help, reach out to someone, anyone, you know, I mean, heck, if you're somebody random who happens to hear this, email us. We'll reach out to you. People are here for you. You're not alone.
I was just going to say the same thing. As a person who is learning to manage my mental illness, I am empathetic to those who might be dealing with the same, and I'm here to help. Yep,
we both are. We both have dealt with mental illness personally in those close to us and in medi settings, and you know, we're here. Nobody needs to suffer alone, even though I know that it can sometimes feel that way. So very sad. The Black Dahlia Murder was a great band, really kind of one of the vanguards of American death metal. And Trevor seemed like a super cool dude. I'd seen interviews with him. He seemed very down to earth, open, honest, humble, but funny, great entertainer, hilarious guy in interviews and stuff. And he will be sadly missed, and thoughts and condolences out to his family and those who are close to him. I know that it's going to be a big loss, and it always is when a life is ended, especially too soon, and for, you know, diseases like this. But also, I'm just going to emphasize that this is a real disease. This is a real thing. People deal with it, and people hopefully are getting to the point that the stigma of mental illness is waning a little bit, but it certainly isn't waning fast enough, and I hope that people will, again, get the help that they need. All right. Well, let's get on to slightly more positive goings on. And I did briefly want to say, without us getting into any spoilers, you know, 2 weeks ago, we did our MCU bracket in anticipation of the release of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And both Braden and I have had a chance to see that movie. And without getting into spoiler territory, Braden, what were some of your thoughts?
Sam Raimi's great. Give him more money.
I didn't realize. I thought I read something. It's been like 9 years since he directed a film. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, the last movie he made was Oz the Great and Powerful in 2013. And apparently that was such a nasty process for him that he had basically retired. But clearly someone at Marvel wrote enough zeros on a check to get him back to do some good old-fashioned journeyman work for Doctor Strange, because I will say there are moments of that Raimi brilliance in it, but by and large it was a Marvel movie. In all good and bad ways, it was a Marvel movie.
Yep, it definitely felt like a Marvel movie. As someone who, I think I'm a little higher on most of the Marvel stuff than you are, I enjoyed it. I did appreciate that while it definitely still had the trappings of a Marvel movie, it also, I think, had Sam Raimi's fingerprints, you know, all 100%. Over it in a lot of places. And
100%.
You know, I think that Marvel has become such a huge thing that it's, and again, maybe I'm being too kind, but as a big fan, I appreciate that they are willing to let directors, to at least some degree, put their stamp on the movies that they direct. That while they still do have a Marvel feel to them, I do like that there's absolutely a different feel between a Russo brothers Marvel movie and, again, now a Sam Raimi Marvel movie and, a Taika Waititi Marvel movie. They feel different enough to the point that I think we can at least appreciate that, hey, these were directed by different people. So
no, I 100% agree with that. And I think that even extends to the TV shows as well. You can definitely see that, especially here in Phase 4, it feels like the formula has been established and is, strengthened enough that they can say, you can do some weird stuff, go for it. And honestly, I think, at least based on our text convo, I think I actually enjoyed this movie maybe more than you did. It definitely is in probably the top 25% of Marvel movies for me, which I know is apparently not very common. It's apparently getting some of the, not the worst, it's still like certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, but it's like the second lowest in terms of its fresh rating of any of the Marvel movies, second only to Thor: The Dark World, which sort of surprises me because I found myself delighted by a lot of it. I really enjoyed it in a lot of respects. I think that I don't really like Benedict Cumberbatch very much, except for when he's being a real snot, and he had some real good snotty moments in there in this movie that I think leaned into that better, because that's the thing that makes him a different person than Tony Stark, because that was one of my biggest complaints. This is not to relitigate what we went through last week. One of my biggest complaints with Infinity War is when you have Tony Stark, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Star-Lord all in the same scene together, and you're like, these are basically just the same guy with the numbers filed off. They're all just like kind of immature know-it-all jerks, and I don't really like it. And so I like when they let Benedict be a snot, which is what makes him different than Tony Stark. Because Tony Stark, I just said Tony Snark, that's Tony Stark. Tony Stark is snarky, Doctor Strange is snotty, and those are two different things, and I like that when they let him lean into the snottiness of who Doctor Strange is. And the horror elements just really worked for me. The ways in which the villain has some really compelling horror imagery related with the sorts of things that they do really worked for me.
Yeah, and I'll be honest and say that the more I have sat with it, I actually think the more I like it. And I'm looking forward to seeing it again to see what my thoughts are on a second watch through. I think that the main villain surprised me in their brutality. I mean, Thanos was brutal in some ways. In other, there are a lot of ways in which I felt that the main antagonist of this movie was more brutal.
Oh yeah.
And I appreciated that they went with that without, again, getting into any spoiler territory since it is not been out very long. I will say that one of the biggest complaints I have seen in some of the online communities that I frequent a little bit is the way Wanda Maximoff's character was treated. And a lot of people didn't feel that where she is in this movie corresponds with where she was at the end of WandaVision, to which I personally don't really agree. And what I'll just say is at the end of WandaVision, I felt that Wanda was contrite and sorry about the fact that she got busted and wasn't going to be able to continue to live out this fantasy life that she had created. And she was way more sorry about getting caught doing it and having to stop than she was about the fact that she had put the people of Westview through this. That's my take on it. And so I look at that and I look at where WandaVision ended and I go, okay, so now you have someone who has become the Scarlet Witch, this incredibly powerful person who is sad, but also really pissed off that she can't live this fantasy that she had created anymore.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I understand why people think that it was a swerve, but to me it doesn't feel like a swerve at all. It feels like one of the natural paths that could have come out of the end of WandaVision. But it feels like a natural path to me that character could take.
I thought so too.
And also, just to wrap this up before we get into what we're actually going to talk about, Xochitl Gomez was so good. She was great.
She was.
America's one of my favorite Marvel characters. I was excited to see her on screen, even though they cast a little younger than I actually expected them to, which is so rarely the case with Hollywood. But Xochitl was really great. I liked her a lot.
I agree. I thought she was excellent. She was able to, in a lot of ways, hold her own against some really strong characters and strong actors, and I very much look forward to her involvement in Marvel properties going forward.
Put her in that Young Avengers book, friends.
There we go.
I mean, not book, I mean movie, because she was in the Young Avengers comic book. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Second volume, I know, not the first volume. She was in the second volume, but still, she was there. Her and Kate Bishop are best friends.
I can see that. In fact, I think it'd be fun to see the two of them and Yelena Belova play off each other. I think that would be good times. Good times. So,
agreed.
Well, let's get down to the meat of what we're talking about today, because, and then there's a method to this, but I think after we went off air last time, I told Braden what my idea was. Unfortunately, he didn't boo me or shout me out of the podcast, because given that, and this is not really a spoiler because it's pretty broadly advertised in at least one of the trailers, if not more of them. I don't know. I didn't watch too many of them. But with the Multiverse of Madness, we have an introduction into the Marvel Cinematic Universe of a classic character, and that would be Professor Charles Xavier, played by Sir Patrick Stewart. And so I thought it would be fun for us to revisit the X-Men movies and kick off what I'm going to refer to, for no other reason than I feel like it, the Summer of X. And we're going to start off with X-Men, 2000's X-Men. Yep, we watched it. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to see, does it hold up? Is it as good as some people thought it was? Is it as good as we remembered? I don't even know if I have the answer for that yet. But before we kick into talking about some of the key points, overall, Braden, what'd you think watching 2000's X-Men over again?
Excuse my French, and you'll probably need to bleep this. But I regret to inform you that this movie slaps. This movie was so good.
I did not think that slaps was going to be the S word that followed that comment.
No, here's the thing. This movie is good. I suddenly I was thinking to myself, X-Men gets a lot of credit for starting off the new wave of superhero cinema in the 2000s, but I think that credit really belongs to Blade and Spider-Man. And no, it is a triumvirate between these three. It is Blade, 98 Blade, 2000 X-Men, 2002 Spider-Man, and those three together are what have created the bedrock of modern cinema of the last 20 years, to be perfectly honest.
Excellent. Well,
what did you think?
It was Sunday night when we were texting about whether or not either of us had watched this yet, and neither of us had. And you said exactly that and I was looking at it right now, you said you were worried that you will repeat the success of the modern Marvel superhero movie is on Blade and Spider-Man's shoulders, not this.
I was wrong.
And I went into it thinking the same thing, and I'll be honest, while I have some big issues with this film that we will discuss, at the end of it, I thought to myself, this held up way better than I expected and is a legitimately good superhero movie for the 21st century.
Agreed.
And you know what I think worked here in this movie's case that made it so that I could comfortably say that? They took it seriously. Not too serious to the point that it was, self-serious, but they didn't treat the setup of the X-Men as a ha-ha, wink-wink, nod-nod. They were like, here's our characters, here's our setup. A lot of you know them, some of you won't, but we're going to treat them as serious characters with serious issues and go from there.
Well, I mean, from the very first scene, this movie sets a tone that I had forgotten that was how it started. I knew that scene was in it. The scene with Eric Lencher as a young teen being taken from his parents at Auschwitz, and I'd forgotten that's how the movie started. I thought that wasn't referenced till X2, but no, the movie starts with, hey, I know this is going to be a heavy-handed allegory, but here's this young Jewish boy who's so distraught at the concentration camp that he's being taken to that he manifests mutant powers. And I will say, this is maybe spoilers for once we get into more of the discussion, this movie does fall into the problem of the villain being right, but goes too far, which is so often the case with, I feel like, superhero movies, where you're like, fundamentally, the villain is on the right side here. They just went too far. Because Magneto is definitely on the right side here. He just went too far.
Well, and I actually think that while he doesn't ever come out and say it, I think the fact that Charles continues to maintain this relationship with Magneto kind of hints at the fact that he feels the same. Like he understands Magneto's position at the very least. He doesn't agree that necessarily that humans and mutants need to go to war with each other. But I do think on some level, you get the idea that Charles at least understands the reasons why Magneto feels they have been made second-class citizens. I don't know.
And again,
sense, but
I feel like the cinematography and the writing and the direction did this so well by starting with that Auschwitz scene and then later on cutting to Magneto looking at the numbers tattooed on his forearm and just being like, these are very direct parallels. And granted, I have always thought that using the X-Men as parallels for subaltern or minoritized people is problematic because they are superheroes and they do have amazing and sometimes extremely dangerous powers, which is not the way that it works in the real world because people are just people. So like I am 100% with the people who are like, you can't use the X-Men as a subaltern or minoritized people allegory because then you're basically just saying that they're black people or Jewish people or whatever or gay people or whatever subaltern group you're talking about are to be feared because they are somehow different when in fact we're all the same. I 100% agree that is a problem with using this analysis or this reading of the X-Men movies. However, it also really works because they are a minoritized people who are vilified by what the movie calls the normal people, which again, that's another discussion, is having the non-mutant people be called normal and the other people being called mutants. But still, they are hunted, they are feared, they are vilified, and so it's understandable why they would have those feelings of no, like this is not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I like the points that you bring up. I agree. It doesn't work as a straight one-to-one. Oh yes, we're bringing light to the plight of marginalized minorities and individuals who maybe not are part of the majority or what fits the quote norm. And again, I'm just air quoting that because kind of the word normal is stupid because we're all different and
Agreed.
We're all human and like full stop, end, boom. That's it. Period. So anyway, moving that aside, I do think, and I agree, let's just jump in. I'm not going to blow a spoiler horn because this is a 22-year-old movie. And if you get spoiled on something, good, I guess it's your fault.
Go watch it.
Braden.
Go watch it.
Go watch it.
We're spoilers from here on out. It starts with an Auschwitz scene and it just goes up from there.
So the only thing I will say before that is the actual little CGI intro doesn't hold up. That was the one thing that didn't work for me. And so that was the first thing I wrote.
It's kind of yucky, yeah.
Yeah, the credit sequence doesn't hold up, but then we move directly into this Auschwitz sequence, which is incredibly effective and really sets the stage, like you said, for a movie that goes, we're going to take our subject matter seriously. And again, that's why this movie ended up working as well as it did for me. And
Agreed.
I really did. I liked it so much more when it was over than I thought I was going to. And that was a huge, pleasant surprise.
I was shocked by how much I liked this movie because I 100% expected to come in hot saying this movie sucks. And that is not how I felt at all. There was, again, it's not a perfect movie. It's not even a great movie, but it is a very good movie with some really tranchant writing, some fun action sequences, some thoughtful elements to it. And I had a really fun time watching it last night.
Yeah, no, it was good. So we start with this Auschwitz sequence. We see Eric developing or manifesting his powers, again, in a really cool way, where he's got all these soldiers trying to hold on to him in the mud, and he's reaching for these gates that have closed behind where his parents were taken, and his magnetic powers manifest, and he's being pulled towards these gates, and the gates are being bent towards him, and he's got 3 or 4 Nazi soldiers holding on to him. They're all sliding through the mud until one finally just smacks him in the head with the butt of a rifle and knocks him out. And then everybody collapsed to the ground. And then boom, we've got this mangled gate. And that's what the shot ends with, is kind of a brownish toned scene with the rain falling, mud, and just this mangled gate. And boom, we go straight from that into a scene that I didn't feel worked quite as well. But here we have another mutant manifesting her powers, and we move to Rogue, played by Anna Paquin. And, she's up in her room and she goes to kiss a boy and immediately starts like draining his life force and backs away and is freaking out and calls her mom and her dad, and they come running up, and, the dad's call 911, and they're just basically screaming at her, "What did you do? What did you do?" What did you think about this scene? Again, for some reason, there was something about it that didn't quite click for me, and I don't know what it is.
I thought that it worked, but it was a little abrupt and a little messy. I will agree with you there. But yeah, one thing about this movie that is not as prevalent here, but I remember it being really prevalent in X2. So I'm interested to see if that is the case, or if that's just my remembering it, is specifically using mutant powers as an allegory for queerness. And you definitely don't get that in this movie, but I remember, because there's a scene in X2 where Bobby has to come out to his parents as a mutant. That is extremely, this is a person coming out to their parents as gay.
Okay.
But you don't get that. You don't get that as much here. So I do agree with you that I don't know. It just doesn't have the weight that I think that sort of scene of like your parents finding out that you are a mutant works in X2, from what I remember.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to compare those two, because I had forgotten that scene is in X2 until you brought it up. We move from there to this, I don't know if it's a Senate thing, like a Senate hearing, or if it's a United Nations thing, but now we've got Jean Grey, who's presenting, talking about, mutants, and we've got Senator Kelly, who's pushing back, and he's talking about, we need mutants to register. And this immediately kind of brought to mind the ideas of Captain America Civil War and the Sokovia Accords. And I saw a lot of kind of parallels between those two, again, looking at things just from a fictional universe standpoint. And as in Civil War, we've got sort of Tony and Cap on the two sides of this. Here, we've got Charles and Magneto. And I don't know, what did you think about kind of the comparisons between the two sides in Civil War versus the two sides that it sets up here?
In Civil War, both sides are wrong and stupid. And in this movie, both sides are right and good.
Okay, I like that. Talk to me a little bit more.
Here's the thing. This is maybe going to be trite, especially coming from a white person, but for a movement to exist, it needs its Martins and it needs its Malcolms. In other words, it needs its Martin Luther King Jr.'s. It needs, and granted, this is not always true for Martin Luther King Jr. because the FBI killed him because he was pushing for socialism. So, let's not get it twisted here. The FBI definitely murdered that dude because he started moving out of race politics and into class politics. But that's neither here nor there. But they also murdered Malcolm X a few years earlier for being a militant black man who was pushing in a less pacifist and more violent way for equality and equity, and that's what you see in Charles Xavier and Eric Lencher, is the person who wants to do it diplomatically, the person who wants to appeal to the better angels of people's nature, and the person who says, no, that didn't work last time when they killed my parents, and it's not going to work this time when they're going to try to kill me.
Yeah. And, you know, when you put it that way, it definitely highlights the differences between this and the conflict in Civil War. And I hadn't quite thought of it that way. So I appreciate that. I think that that's a good point and a good way to sort of point out
the other difference. The other difference between this and Civil War is that ultimately the conflict in Civil War is, should superpowered individuals have some sort of governmental like overhead, which is what Tony is pushing for, some sort of governmental like control. But also one of the things in that movie is, you know, the general says, well, if you don't want to do this, then you're just not a superhero anymore. Whereas in this movie, it's, oh, we're going to put you into camps.
Yeah.
Which, again, is a different thing. It's very different from saying, Cap, give me your shield, you're not a superhero anymore, or Cap, you're going to the Utah desert to live in a concentration camp.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. You know, we get a conversation here between Magneto and Charles, and I think it works because, number one, you have, at least in my opinion, two fantastic actors. And
100%.
And having Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen playing these two characters is so much of what makes this work, and gets back to this idea of they took the material seriously, because you don't cast actors of that caliber for something that is not going to be treated with at least some degree of gravity, of respect. And I think that first conversation you see between the two of them, where Charles is really, again, trying to tell Magneto, hey, it doesn't have to be this way, whatever. And Magneto basically just responds with, yeah, it does, because we've tried the other way. And look what they did to us.
Exactly.
You know? And again, I think that it's a great scene that sets up the continuing conflict between these two. And it's interesting the way their relationship evolves over the course of many of the movies.
One thing that I think is really interesting, just to mention about the casting, because I think you're exactly right, that as I was watching this movie, much of the cast is extremely well cast, even if they're given very little to go with.
Yeah.
You know, like Famke Janssen is great as Jean Grey. It helps that she's like one of the most beautiful women on the planet in 2000. Like, good gravy. She just is great looking. And then you've got, you know, Hugh Jackman doing amazing work here, even though, you know, I remember when he was cast and people were like, he's too tall. And like, yeah, true, he is too tall. But he makes it work, and so it's fine. He makes it work. And I just have to say, because I made a note of that the first time we see the Wolverine character, you know, other than, yes, the complaints about his height, whatever, it's fine, because he is so good in every other way. Like, incredibly good.
I mean, he pulls off this exterior of, I don't care, I'm all in this for just myself, that's all I care about. But that's not even close to true. And I remember, you know, you've obviously read way more comic books than I have. But even as a kid, I remember reading Wolverine and getting that same sort of feeling, that this very gruff exterior, this very appearance of, I'm in it for me and that's all. But deep down, that is not even remotely true. And I think Hugh Jackman manages to pull that push-pull of the character off in a really, really good way. I mean, it's the reason why he is going to be so hard to recast Wolverine if that's what they decide to do. I mean, you know,
I imagine they have to, because he's too old. He's too old to come back as Wolverine. You want someone who can do this for another 15, 20 years.
Which is what he did, you know, between 2000 and then, you know, Logan came out in what, 2017, 2018?
And it worked for him to be an old grizzled Wolverine, because he was old. He's an old grizzled human now. So you've got to cast someone who's younger. But I totally agree. And that is one of the things that I think this movie nails, even though, again, they're not building off anything that was necessarily in the comics here, because Rogue is an adult by the time she comes into contact with the X-Men. for those of you who might not know, she starts as a baddie in the comics. She is originally from the Captain Marvel comics and is one of Captain Marvel's enemies, or not Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, and is one of Ms. Marvel's enemies. And then she eventually steals Ms. Marvel's powers. That's why if you remember the 90s show when she's like super strong and can fly everywhere, that's because she sucked all of Ms. Marvel's powers out of her, and they stuck because she sucked too hard. But she's an adult in the comics.
Yes.
She's not a teen. And so when they rewrite Rogue to become a teen, then they pass that kind of paternal tendency that Wolverine has so often had in the comics for Jubilee, for X-23, for newer, younger Pakistani-American Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, for all of these characters who he's had these kind of paternal, gruff father figure-y sort of relationships with. They're really able to transfer that to Rogue by writing her younger, by writing her as a teen in this film.
Yeah. And that's kind of the next scene we get up in Alaska, because there'd been a previous conversation that Rogue had when she was getting ready to kiss that dude about her wanting to travel to Alaska. And so she ends up in this town in Alaska, goes into a bar. Here's a cage fight. And we've got some big, burly dude who decides he wants to get in there and go at it with the Wolverine, as they call him. And of course, he gets some good hits in, and Wolverine kind of just takes it. And then finally he goes to punch, and Wolverine punches back, and you hear that metal clang of the dude's fist punching the adamantium bones of Wolverine, and the guy's hand snaps, and then he like headbutts him and, takes him out. And the whole time you've got Rogue there who's kind of watching this. And this was the one part that I didn't quite understand. And is it that, and help me understand, do you think that, can she tell there's something different about Wolverine? Is that why she keeps sitting there looking at him so much? Or like, what is her rationale for sitting in this bar, staring at this dude, and when he's done with the fight, she's still just sitting there kind of staring at him at the bar? Like,
well, I read that as her seeing, not necessarily that she can sense that he has powers, but just seeing another outcast.
Okay.
Like she has, thumbed her way up to, northern Alberta, and she's out in the boondocks, and she finds this person who also is an outcast. She's broke. She's starving. She doesn't know what to do. And she's like, and she sees someone who's clearly also on the periphery of society. I think that's why she is drawn to him, not necessarily because she can sense his power, but just that she can sense that he too is an outcast for some reason, which she very quickly finds out it's because he has metal bones and has 3 big long knives that come out of his freaking fists.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely a different dude. But no, I like that. I like that explanation, because that was one of the things that I just didn't know. I made a note because I did take notes while I was watching this, because, I'm getting to be an old man and I forget things. So I wrote down, why is she stalking Wolverine? Because that's kind of how it felt. But, she obviously had figured out enough, whether it was beforehand or as he was walking out, she knew what his vehicle was. He's got this sad camper and a trailer and stuff. And so he leaves the bar and is driving down the road, and somehow he can sense that there's something going on. I think maybe she moves in the back, and he pulls over, gets out, goes to the back little trailer. There she is underneath like a tarp or something. And he tells her to get out. And again, this is one of those moments where you see him, he wants to be the gruff, old guy who doesn't care. Well, not old guy, but the gruff guy who doesn't care about anybody but himself. Leaves her on the road, starts driving down, and then stops, backs up, and tells her to get in his car. And then, like you said, he can tell she hasn't eaten anything. He gives her what it looks like maybe jerky. Is that what he gives her to eat?
I think it was jerky. That's what I read it as.
She just starts shoving that stuff into her mouth, and I'm like, this is either jerky that has not been cured very well, or you are just like, you stole somebody's powers to make yourself be able to chomp that stuff down, because she was eating that jerky and masticating it to the point of swallowing far too fast for any jerky I have ever had.
It was those Lowry beef sticks that are like all chopped up and then reformed. You could do that with those.
Yeah, I suppose. All I was thinking is I'm one of those weird people that like I can't eat beef jerky unless I know that there's some dental floss close by because I'm going to have to floss my teeth as second I'm done eating the beef jerky because I got to get the beets out, the pieces out of there. It was giving me a little bit of anxiety the whole time she was chomping on these things because I'm like, you don't have any floss, sweetheart. You're going to be just like getting those little things out of in between your teeth for the next 12 hours. So then we get introduced to one of our big bad's henchmen, and all of a sudden, tree falls down. They run into it. Wolverine, because he's not wearing his seatbelt, because she had just barely said something about, oh, don't you think you should be wearing your seatbelt? And he's like, I don't need my seatbelt. Boom, he goes flying through the windshield, sliding on the icy road, and then we've got Sabretooth. What do you think about Sabretooth?
Here's the thing about all of the villains other than Magneto, they're not very good.
You know what I wrote down about Sabretooth? I said, let me see, I'm looking for it. Sabretooth, he looks like a cut-rate WWE wrestler.
Yep. and that's about what you get out of him.
Yeah, that's about all the depth we have. You know, he's apparently strong. He's got crazy hair. He's got black eyes, claws, and he growls sometimes. And, you know, he and Wolverine go at it a little bit. In the meantime, Rogue is stuck. She's pinned in the car because she had her seatbelt on, so she didn't go through the windshield, but she's pinned. And there's a fire in the camper, and then all of a sudden it gets to a propane tank, and things are going bad. And then boom, we've got Storm and Cyclops, and they show up and rescue our heroes, and off runs Sabretooth back to Magneto's base. Then we transition to Wolverine waking up. Now, here was one of the weird things about this movie for me, and I understand that it was kind of a storytelling thing, but this was one of the things that didn't work. And again, not a huge issue. But Wolverine's mutation is his healing factor, correct?
Yes. Yes.
That's like his power. Well, and the claws, yes.
Bone claws.
And the claws that were bone, and then, of course, he gets the adamantium infused into a skeleton and everything. But, so I found it a little odd that, man, this guy takes some hits and is like down for the count. And then other times, he like gets his face sliced open and it just immediately knits back together. So, again, a bit of a nitpick, yes. But there were times where I'm like, it seems like his healing factor is taking a long time to kick in here. And then at other times it's like, boom, right there, ready to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there was some inconsistency there with how powerful his healing ability was. Yeah.
So, you know, we get this scene where Wolverine wakes up in the mansion in Xavier's school for the gifted, or whatever exactly it's called. And I thought this was a little weird that Charles's choice to try and reach out to him is to like telepathically whisper little things to his mind to like freak him out.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that was a little weird. So Wolverine's running through the school. The best move. Like eventually, boom, he ends up in the classroom that Professor X is teaching in. And Professor X wraps up their physics lesson and sends the kids out. And then they start talking, and we find out that, you know, Wolverine doesn't really know what happened to him, but it's been at least like 15 years he's been kind of just a loner out running on his own. And again, I like it. I like the school. It looks cool. It was a little weird that this is... Instead of, I mean, if he can reach out to his mind, why is he doing this weird whispering? And you see Wolverine looking around and kind of, where is the sound coming from? What's going on? Instead of just like reaching out to him telepathically and being like, yo, dog, I'm a telepath. Come and find me here.
I agree.
But
I agree.
So then we moved to this UN summit, and it's funny. This part I thought was funny because there's these politicians who are getting out, and people are like you'd think that they were looking at, oh gosh, why did I just blank on the name of that K-pop band that's like super huge right now? BTS, thank you. Like I'm looking at this and people are getting so excited at these politicians getting out of their vehicles. I'm like, dude, you think this is like BTS getting out or something? And I was like, I wrote down again, I'm like, politicians don't have fans like that who are psycho fans cheering and waving. And then I thought back to the last 5+ years and I thought, oh shit.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
And then I was angry for a few minutes, but then the movie went on so I could stop being angry about it. This is where we first get introduced to Mystique. And Mystique is weird, and I think she has a much larger role in the second one, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I thought that this 2000s Mystique looked better than the newer version.
The design's terrible. We'll get that out of the way first. The design is terrible.
The design for both of them is terrible.
Yeah. No matter how you slice it, the design is terrible. The fact that she's like, let's have her run around buck naked, when like she had one of the most striking outfits in the comics. Thank you very much. Having this blue-skinned woman wear this like super high slits on either side dress with a skull belt in stark white.
It was awesome.
It's a great outfit. Put her in the outfit. But instead they're like, she's going to run around naked because then she can shapeshift to look whatever she needs to. Like, whatever. It's gross. But I do agree that her makeup looks better than Jennifer Lawrence's makeup from what I've seen. I've only saw First Class, but I've seen screenshots and GIFs of the later second trilogy, and boy, or I think it's quadrilogy because there's 4 of them. Boy, does that makeup look dodgy.
Well, you know, we'll get to Dark Phoenix, much to my chagrin and at the same time my joy at the fact that I'm going to get to subject you to that one, because it is truly subjecting someone to watch that movie.
Well, I mean, you got to get through Last Stand first. We got to crucify Jean Grey first before we can do it again a second time.
And we'll definitely get to, because it is incredible. Those are both truly terrible movies. But it's really odd. I mean, the difference just from First Class to
I saw
Dark Phoenix, it really looks like in Dark Phoenix somebody was just like, I don't give an F anymore, just whatever.
Yeah, like suddenly she's like turquoise instead of dark blue.
Yeah.
It's like, why is the paint so light? That's not the color she's ever been. But anyway,
I will also briefly say I did appreciate in the newer series, the Jennifer Lawrence version of Mystique generally is clothed, at least. Like,
that's
because
she didn't want
to go.
She didn't want to have to wear the full body paint, and like, more power to her. She had a hit movie, and then she was like, I can negotiate a better outfit. Put me in the jumpsuit, and they were like, okay, but like, fair. I would also want to negotiate being in the jumpsuit and not my all-togethers.
Yes, absolutely. So we get this scene with Mystique, and if I'm remembering correctly, this is where we've got Senator Kelly again, who's been he's the face of the mutant opposition. And Mystique has replaced one of his aides. They're in a helicopter, and boom, she takes him out, knocks him out with some funny footwork that I'm like, I don't know anybody who can hit that hard with their feet in a close quarters like this, that you're going to knock someone out. But whatever, more power to you. You got some fancy footwork going on. And so she hijacks the helicopter and takes him off. We go back to the X-Men mansion, school, whatever. And here's the one part of the movie that I'd say is really cringy. And that for me is this, what feels like totally forced relationship / romance between Jean Grey and Wolverine.
I mean, yes.
I mean, I know that this conflict between them and Cyclops does stem from the comics, correct?
Oh, yeah. That love triangle has existed since the 80s. And has gone so far in the newer comics that I haven't read an X-Men comic in 10 years, but apparently in the Hickman run that is either currently wrapping up and being turned over to someone else because Hickman doesn't want to write monthly comics anymore, which I don't blame him. Apparently they share rooms now. Jean's room is in the middle, and there are doors on either side to Scott and Logan, so I guess they're swinging.
Okay. Well, like I say, we move to this scene where she's doing some studies on him to try and figure out, what's up with this dude. And he starts like kind of trying to hit on her and making these weird sort of, at least again, in my opinion, kind of creepy jokes towards her.
Agreed.
And it just didn't work for me at all because, except, other than, as you mentioned, I mean, Famke Janssen is absolutely gorgeous. But like, there's no other reason for him to be in almost what felt like kind of a lecherous manner, sort of, making these comments and stuff to her. That was a scene that, again,
gross. It's kind of grody.
It was really gross and uncomfortable for me. So,
yep.
Then we go back to Magneto and we get introduced to, we've seen Mystique, we've seen Sabretooth, and now we get my favorite of Magneto's henchmen, and that would be Toad. As
you just
played
like him.
by
you
Ray
just
Park.
Like him. Yeah, I was going to say you just like him because Ray Park played him. Because he's terrible.
What I actually wrote is Toad is stupid and useless. That was my one comment.
Dumbest power.
Yes, his tongue, and he uses
and jumping.
Well,
and he's got green skin,
greenish skin, not green skin. Like it looks like they did a pass with the green, and then they gave him like a day or two to like sweat half of it off and
it's
rub
gross.
half of it. He's like wiping his face on the sleeves of his hoodie, and so he's got some smeared there and stuff. Anyway, Toad, stupid, useless, terrible character. Sabretooth, not much better. Mystique, does she even really talk in this with her own voice, or is it only in the second movie? I'm trying to remember if I even remember hearing her talk.
She has like one line in the whole film.
Yeah.
Because she says on the helicopter, she says like, people like you are why I was afraid to go to school. And that's the only line she says in the entire movie.
Kind of one of those problems that we see in a lot of movies, and I'm not saying that by any means to excuse it, but you've got female characters who are being, again, severely under or misutilized. And I think that Mystique is a case of that here in this X-Men film.
And I think that it doesn't help. It doesn't help when you cast Rebecca Romijn, because you're casting her on the strength of her looks and not as an actor at that point, because she hadn't really been in anything at that point. So they were like, she's hot, let's put her in this. And so I think that the film's writing reflects she was there to be eye candy, both in terms of the way that her design works, the way that she has nothing to say, the kind of, gross way that the camera sometimes frames her, while still like trying to be like, we're still a PG-13 movie, but we will show a lot of side butt, even if we're not showing butt cheek. Things like that.
It was a bit of a shame because I think Mystique potentially is a very interesting character. And I just felt that she was under and misutilized in this movie, but I can't remember if I think that the other movies do anything to remedy that. So I suppose we'll find out.
We'll find out when we get there.
So my question is this: what is it about Magneto's power to manipulate metal makes it so that he can create mutants? Do you think is he just creating this field that is inducing just like mass genetic mutation so that you go from normal to like, boom, now every cell in your body is mutated? Or
this is never explained. And they don't even try. Like, they don't even try to hand wave it. They're just like, this is a machine that when Magneto gets in it, it almost kills him, but he turns people into mutants. And it is not explained. And you're just like, okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we go back to the mansion, and we've got, again, I just have this line I written down. It says, Logan/Jean is no bueno. And then I have Scott as a douche.
Here's the thing. Again, really good casting that doesn't have a whole lot to do. James Marsden plays Scott as the uptight douchebag so well.
Yes, he does. He definitely does. And we see it in this scene. And again, it's just one of those where it's like, it's kind of dumb. And, Logan's like, oh, you're going to tell me to keep my hands off your girl? And he says, well, if I had to do that, then she wouldn't be my girl.
But also keep your hands off my girl.
Also keep your hands off my girl. And I was just like, oh, come on. Like I was actually kind of okay with him being like, no, I don't need to say that because she can stick up for herself. And then he has to say it anyway. And that was dumb. We then get this scene, and I do think it's an important scene, and it actually worked better for me now. Now we've got we've got Logan. He's having these bad dreams. He's making noise. Somehow over in her dorm, Rogue can hear this. And she comes in to check on him, and she's trying to wake him up. And in the middle of this, he's having this dream and these flashbacks of what looks like kind of when they grafted the adamantium to him. And he wakes up and boom, just claws right through her. And they're sticking out her back. And she just is like, He pulls him back, is freaking out, and she just reaches out and touches his face so that she starts to absorb his healing factor. And it was really interesting. The other kids now have kind of come and see this. And you can definitely tell that this is a scary thing to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about this scene? I found it pretty effective.
Me too. I thought that it was really, really effective in again, building those stakes and giving them both motivation for future scenes. Logan for wanting to apologize for what he had done. Rogue for being like, oh no, I used my powers again. I've got to run away again. And having that feeling of like instability when she'd finally found, at least some sort of stability, somewhat, having that immediately taken away from her again. I think that it's a good scene to set the stakes for those characters. I
agree. And it does a good job of kind of showing that here is Rogue, who, like you said, just feels like she found somewhere where she can belong. But even in that setting, they're afraid of her because of what her power can do. And so that you can see them really kind of putting her in a tricky situation. We jump back and we've got the senator who's standing in a cage high up, and he's kind of stretchy. He's pushing his face against the bars and he's like stretching through it. And I couldn't quite figure out what his mutation was, because he stretches through and then Magneto comes in and he's dangling from the thing, and Sabretooth tries to pull him back up and he just keeps like stretching until he falls down into the water. But then when he comes out of the water at the land, it kind of looks like he's got gills on his back that then seal up. So it was, this was a little weird because it was not clear to me what exactly did this mutation that they do for him. What did it create? What abilities or whatever? It was kind of like, well, what's going to create the abilities that we need? Let's make him stretchy so he can squeeze through the grate, and then let's make it so he's got gills on his back so he can survive swimming to shore. I don't know. Yeah, it's unclear. So we jump back to the to the school, and we've got Bobby, Iceman, who is not Bobby, but he kind of pulls Rogue aside and he's like, hey, you need to go away. All the kids are freaked out about you, and plays upon that fear that she has that I found a place that I belong, but now I don't belong anymore. And so she runs away. She takes off. We get, Logan deciding to go after her and try and find her. He steals, isn't this one of the places where he steals Scott's motorcycle? It is. And in the midst of this, we've now got the school infiltrated by Mystique, who then goes and puts this canister of something in the liquid for Cerebro, which, again, kind of like Magneto's powers, this is just a hand-wavy thing. We're going to put some liquid that makes the blue liquid go brown, and that's going to mess everything up. It was a little weak, but at the same time, it's one of those things I don't know if they had bothered to take the time to try and come up with some hand-wavy explanation. I don't think it actually would have worked any better, so sure. Agreed. There's something to be said for just being like, suspension of disbelief. The big ball makes Professor X find people throughout the planet because of the glowy juice, and just, it's fine. And we're going to put some poop in the glowy juice, because that's what exactly. Exactly. Poop in the glowy juice. One thing I did notice here is that one of the places where the casting, if you look at it, looks like it should work, but really didn't work great for me, was Halle Berry as Storm. Well, that is definitely true. Of the main X-Men, of the good guy characters, it's the weakest casting by a country mile, because not only is she not given anything to do like the other characters are, she also doesn't bring something to it like the others do. Like, again, we said James Marsden is not given anything to do, but he brings that dickery really well to it. But she is not given much to do. Sometimes tries to affect an accent, other times no.
Her powers
Yeah,
always look kind of hokey. Her eyes turning white never look very good. You can always tell that it's post-prod. She's really the weakest part of this main cast in terms of both performance and portrayal in the powers and everything.
Yeah. It's interesting in small things to see where technology is advanced. Compare the wide eyes of Storm to the wide eyes of Moon Knight. And the Moon Knight wide eyes are cool. And it works.
I mean, it does.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the accent thing. I picked up on that and I was like, man, this kind of feels like early Elizabeth Olsen in the MCU, where you were never quite sure what accent we were going for and what we're going to get.
And to be fair, I do remember that I think it's by movie 2. She's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. And it goes away. She just talks with an American accent.
I hope so, because it definitely didn't work, the accent. Then we get to the train scene where Logan finds Rogue on the train. Train starts moving. I like this scene. Again, I thought that this was a pretty cool scene in that the train gets stopped and you got Magneto just basically using his powers to just pop this thing open like an aluminum can. And the train just goes peeling open. And of course, Logan goes after him, but I don't know if adamantium's magnetic or not, but it must be, because now you've got Magneto just controlling Logan and like even sort of spreading his claws apart, which, as I started thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that probably hurt pretty bad. So
Indeed.
I thought this was a cool scene where they come, and the whole time everybody thought Magneto was going after Wolverine, when in fact, no, what he wanted Rogue. And so he gets Rogue, and they take Rogue at that point. What do you think about the train scene? Any additional comments?
Well, I think that the scene outside of the train scene, where Magneto comes out and all of the cops are there.
Yep.
And he takes all of their guns out of their hands and points them at them, and then pulls the trigger on one and stops the bullet right in that dude's forehead, and then is just like, you can let me take the girl, Charles, or I can fire them all. I don't think I can catch them all. Is so menacing.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It really was. It was a good scene. And I don't know if they did it intentionally, but in watching that scene, I thought about the scene in maybe the 4th or 5th episode of WandaVision, where Wanda leaves the Hex with the drone and forces all of the military folks to point their laser sights on the one guy, I don't remember his name because he was so forgettable. But I saw, again, kind of saw them going, yeah, I wonder, were they thinking about this scene when they made that scene? And I would be more surprised if they weren't than if they were, because this is, like you said, it's a very chilling scene and super effective. And you see that dude sitting there and the bullet's just like spinning in his forehead. And there's a little bit of a pressure thing where you can see the bullets sort of displacing the skin and stuff. And I thought, man, I'd totally soil myself if that was me. So it worked.
Yeah, I thought it was really effective.
So we get to Senator Kelly now has managed to make his way to the X-Men, and he gets found by them. And in the meantime, in other parts of the movie, we still have Mystique sort of wearing the Senator Kelly skin suit to, I'm not really a skin suit, but she looks like Senator Kelly to kind of at one point say, oh, I was wrong to, say that we need to register mutants and this, that, and the other. But I did think it was weird that Senator Kelly then just like turns to water and just like kind of gushes away. But that's what happens. He turns to water because he's unstable, because these mutations, that whatever Magneto's device, yes, it introduced mutations, but they're unstable and which, okay, it actually kind of works because, yeah, if you introduce that many mutations, I mean, look, okay, this is an aside. Why do things like platinum-based chemotherapy and radiation work to treat cancer? Well, apologize to anybody who knows more about this than me, but I'm going to give you kind of the dumbed down version. Cancer cells reproduce a lot faster and more often than normal cells. It's one of the things that makes them cancer. They don't follow normal cell cycles. They grow when they're not supposed to. They reproduce more often. And so when we're looking under a microscope, one of the ways we determine even kind of how aggressive or how high a grade of cancer is how many mitotic figures are there? So how many cells do we see that are actively dividing? And in normal tissue, you don't see very many. It's really uncommon to find a mitosis. But in cancer cells, you can find a whole bunch. So if the cells are reproducing a lot faster, and then we introduce mutations into them, either with radiation or with things like platinum-based chemotherapy and that binds to some of the base pairs and introduces these mutations, well, normally your body's going to have time to fix those mutations if it finds them. And we have all sorts of built-in mechanisms to do so. But in cancer cells, because they're reproducing so much faster than normal, then these mutations get introduced and then have a chance to propagate and propagate and propagate. And so it ends up killing off the cancer as opposed to killing off other things, because the normal tissue, for the most part, has time to identify the errors in the DNA and then fix those before it makes another copy and introduces that mutation again and again and again. So
Sure.
I can see where they're coming from, saying if we just basically mutated his whole body, these mutations are unstable. If every cell's had these mutations kind of put in, nothing has had a chance to kind of say what mutations can we live with, what mutations are going to cause cells to die. So
Sure.
I thought
And
it
like
looked silly,
the conceit,
but I was like, hey, it works.
Yeah. Well, in the conceit is that mutants are born with the X gene. Mutants are born as mutants, but they develop their mutant powers as a secondary sex characteristic, essentially, which is why almost all of them develop those powers in their early teen years, because they develop at the same time that so many other secondary gender characteristics are expressed. But they're always there, just like how...
Yep.
For the vast majority of people, you have the genes that you have, and then they express themselves as you get older in different ways. But same sort of thing with the mutants. So when you take a 45-year-old man and suddenly introduce those mutations, obviously things are going to go poorly.
I would like to say he was older than 45 because I'm 45, and I think he was older than me. I'm just saying.
It's possible. It's entirely possible.
I'm just feeling old, and I don't want to be 45 and be compared to that dude.
He was 55 when that movie was filmed, so you're good.
Perfect. Okay. Whew. I feel a little bit better. Real quick until we get to kind of the finale, because the finale is one part that doesn't quite hold up as well for me as the rest of the movie. We've got Professor X goes in to try and use Cerebro again. It's got the poop juice in it. He falls down and collapses. They find him. At some point, Jean Grey, sorry, I blanked on her name there. All I could think was the actor's name. Jean Grey goes in and realizes that there's poop juice and unhooks the thing with the poop juice, and all of a sudden it goes back to blue, and she puts it on and she tries to use it to figure out where they're going. And they managed to figure out that she's at the Statue of Liberty. Here on Ellis Island, we've got this meeting where there's all these dignitaries and UN people, and they're talking about this mutant registration. And so Magneto's going to use his device in the Statue of Liberty to send the sparkly wave and mutate everybody at this thing. And they're like, oh no, he could kill everybody in New York. We got to go stop him. And so they get in the jet and they get on their costumes, and I don't love the costumes or the outfits or the suits or whatever you want to call them, but at least the movie had the balls to make some sort of comment and have Wolverine make a snide comment about it, and Scott come back with a bit of a snide comment to say, well, what do you want? Like yellow spandex. So I don't love the suits, but I thought that they at least a little wink and a nod to the fact of that. I don't know. What do you think about the suits?
I understand why they did what they did with the leather outfits. Again, I think that they were really influenced by the success of two things, Blade and The Matrix, both of which feature heavily leather-inspired costume direction.
Yeah.
So I think
yes,
I think that is where it ultimately comes from, is the influence of those two movies. And so I'm not surprised that they went with it. I understand why they did. Prior to this, think about our superhero movies we've had that were really big and successful. It was really just Superman and the Batman movie. Like the Superman movies and the Batman movies. Superman movies lean into it. He is wearing a spandex outfit, and it works because it's Superman. It works.
Yep.
Batman doesn't. Batman leans into heavy latex body armor type stuff because he's not a superhero. He's a science hero or whatever other line you want to use because he doesn't have superpowers.
I was going to call him because he's a rich hero.
Also, he's a rich hero. That is what he is. He's obscenely wealthy, so he can have the body armor. And so I think that they tried to cut more towards the body armor style without it being the heavily stylized body armor you would definitely, especially seen in the Schumacher films. So again, I understand why, given what had happened in the 90s in action and superhero and kind of science fiction cinema, why they went with it. And it really is until Spider-Man when once again they say, no, you can just do what's in the comics. You can just do it. It works. And to be fair, I'm kind of glad that they don't, because no X-Man costume is as cool as Spider-Man's costume. Because part of the reason why the Superman costume, or Superman in the spandex and Spider-Man in the spandex work, is because their costumes are incredibly designed.
Yes.
Whereas the X-Men have some good designs, but there's a reason why the X-Men have had... What's Jean Grey's costume look like, Peter?
I have no idea because it changes so much.
Exactly. I know that usually Cyclops wears blue, and usually his face shooty thing is yellow, usually. But, like, outside of that, okay. How many different outfits has Wolverine had? A bajillion in different colors. Oh, do you want it in yellow and blue? Do you want it in darker yellow and tan? Do you want it in black and gray? So I think that leaning into the leather outfits works to be like, you know, we're trying to make this seem a little more realistic. And it really wasn't until Spider-Man when, you know, they said, no, you can just do it. You can just be bright. You just be bright. And that's true of the whole film. Like, I think that a lot of this film is really gorgeously shot. There's some really great cinematography. There's some really striking images, but it's very dark. It was a very dark colored film. And I think a lot of that is to save money, because it's a lot cheaper to do special effects in the dark because they don't have to look as good. Whereas, again, then 2 years later, you see Spider-Man, and a lot of Spider-Man takes place during the day. And so, you know, I think that it was a combination of special effects evolving so rapidly, as well as, you know, this is a dark set. This is a dark feel. We want it to have that kind of serious feel to it, that we're taking it serious. And I think that they, you know, by and large pulled that off.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I like I say, I appreciated that they made a little comment about the suits in general. You know, both the kind of black leather and then well, what else do you want? And again, it worked. It was just kind of a, look, yeah, we know this isn't the comic books, and you know that there's reasons we're not doing what the comic books showed. So I like that. They get in the plane, they fly to the Statue of Liberty. There's some weird things where they're stealthing the plane with a storm from Storm, but at the same time they're flying low over the water and creating great big huge geysers of water with their plane. But don't think about it too hard. It's a comic book movie, I guess. What did you think about the whole scene here at the Statue of Liberty? Because here's where we've got our big kind of punchy, kicky battle. We've got Sabretooth, we've got Toad, we've got Mystique, and we've got Cyclops, and we've got Storm, and we've got Wolverine, and Jean Grey is there as well, correct? Yes, she is. She's suited up.
Uh-huh.
So we've got our hero team, we got our villain team, and Magneto's, you know, kind of there, and he's a little more involved a little later, but he's off getting all set up. What did you think about this whole battle scene? Because I had some thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what yours are.
It's kind of messy. There are parts where I think it kind of works, but while the action is totally readable, it also doesn't feel very believable.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to that point, one of the issues I had is, okay, we've seen Toad, he's got the tongue, and then at one point, apparently he spits, I don't know, mucus on Jean Grey? I don't know what it is, because at some point it's now like crystallizing hard but anyway, we see that Sabretooth is strong from the beginning, but we don't get anything to say that Mystique and Toad have superhuman strength, but clearly in this battle they do. I mean, you've got Mystique going toe-to-toe with Wolverine, and I'm going, this just doesn't quite work. And the punches and the kicks he's taking I'm sorry, he should be able to shrug those off if she's not super strong. So there were aspects of that didn't quite work for me. And then you have, which I warned Gareth that it was one of the worst lines in any superhero movie, if not more than that, and he still wasn't prepared for just how bad the line is when Storm electrocutes Toad.
I mean, it's really dumb.
It's so bad.
It's really dumb.
I want to know, like, the funny thing is that they set it up. You know, there's a whole, oh, do you know what happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning? If all you were going to do is the same thing as everything else, why did you set it up? Don't set it up. Just leave it. Like, she doesn't have to say anything. Just shoot him with blast him with an electric, bolt of lightning. That part's just still to this day, it's just indecipherable what they were thinking when they decided, well, we're going to set up this line and then the payoff is going to be this.
Well, and one of the funniest things about it is it's then followed by one of my favorite lines in the movie. When
is that
Wolverine,
the one where they see Wolverine? Yes.
Yeah, Wolverine comes back out and, Cyclops is ready to blast him and he says, prove it. Like, prove that you're the real Logan. And he just looks at me and says, you're a dick. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we go from just this absolutely atrocious line to one that just fits because it fits in terms of the character. You're like, yep, totally. That's what Logan would do. And it fits in terms of, I love the fact that Scott just kind of like, yep, okay, yep, that's you.
This is him because the shapeshifter wouldn't have known to say that to me.
Yep. So my final sort of part that I don't quite understand, and again, this is one of the places where the power level seems a little inconsistent. We've already seen that Magneto uses this just to send a wave to wipe out Senator Kelly, and he can't walk. He has to be like helped out of the thing. So now he's got Rogue there, and he's having, he's touching Rogue, so she's draining all his power. And again, we see the kid that she kissed at the beginning. I think there's an offhand comment that she says something about, my first kiss ended up in a coma for 3 weeks. And we've even seen again Logan, who after he touches her, he's out for the count for hours. And this is him with his healing factor. Well, Magneto traps everybody using his magnetic powers up in the torch, or I think it's actually in the head of the Statue of Liberty, pins them all with metal. And then he goes up and he transfers his powers to Rogue and then forces her to start activating this thing. Logan gets out by like stabbing his claws through himself so that they knock off the metal. And then, Scott, his visor's been taken off and he's facing Jean and he's got his eyes closed. And, I can't even remember how, is it Jean's telekinesis that moves the visor to a certain place?
Yeah. So Wolverine and Sabretooth have a big fight on the lid of the head of the Statue of Liberty. And during that fight, Sabretooth, who had been hanging on to that, drops it.
That's right.
Wolverine picks it up, tosses it their way, and then Jean uses her power to grab it, face it the right direction to blast Sabretooth out of the end.
He opens his eyes and boom, he goes flying. They manage to, get Rogue disconnected from this. And again, like, I don't even remember doesn't Scott shoot a blast at Magneto?
Yeah, Scott.
Because Magneto is like,
Wolverine is trying to do it. Magneto, with his weakened powers and weakened state, is stopping him with what little is left of his powers, and so Cyclops blasts him in the back to knock him unconscious, blasts him in the shoulder, and then Wolverine is able to destroy the machine.
And then because Rogue is drained, and we saw how weakened it made Magneto, he touches her, she absorbs again some of his power, and she's saved, and the day's saved, and hooray. We get kind of that final scene where we've got Magneto in his plastic prison playing chess with Xavier.
Which is so cool looking.
It really is. It's
Here's
a super
the thing.
cool looking prison.
Almost all of the sets in this movie feel embodied and real, like they were actual full sets that were built, and they look great.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Like that was the thing I wrote down. I said, man, this plastic prison looks freaking cool.
All of the scenes do. That like big Senate hearing, you're like, no government building has ever looked half as cool as this guy's. Or the mansion is like so antiseptic and like spy when you're in the basement, and then you go upstairs and it's this lush, beautiful old money mansion. It's great set design.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we end, and again, we've got that final coda there, and then we've got Wolverine he's given some directions from Charles Xavier, go to this place and there may be some answers for you. And so he takes off again steals Scott's motorcycle. And that's a wrap. And, I finished it up and I thought to myself, just like we said at the beginning, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I really was concerned that I was not going to like it, that it was going to feel like a chore watching, and it didn't feel like a chore at all. It was a lot of fun to watch, and it was a decent movie. Not the best comic book movie, but then again, far from the worst. And I think for the time really did help put things on track for where we are today with comic book movies that not only can make millions, if not over, billions of dollars, but can be taken to some degree seriously as movies that are worth watching.
Yeah, I was shocked by how much I enjoyed this movie, and I expected to come in being like, yo, the movie sucked, and it's just not how I felt about it. I really enjoyed myself.
The final thing I'll say that I really liked and appreciated as we talked about when we were both filled with a little trepidation as to whether, when we were getting ready to watch it, I remember texting you and saying, hey, at least it's only an hour and 44 minutes long.
It's true.
And so I thought it was good. It didn't overstay its welcome. It's not true. Trying to tell a huge story. It's a fairly small story. And that works because it's introducing us to a whole lot of characters that we haven't seen before. And I remember thinking when the initial Avengers came out, and we talked about this when we did our draft, one of the things that I thought was so impressive was, hey, we pulled together this whole cast of superheroes and we're going to make a movie that makes sense with them, that makes you like them and really seems cohesive. And I in my head, I was like, that had never been done before. And while I agree that because of the backstory with a lot of the main characters and things, from that standpoint, I think Avengers is better in the way it pulls together this team. But while not everybody works, and you've definitely got some characters who overshadow, like Wolverine, I thought this movie did a really surprisingly good job of bringing this team of characters and introducing them enough that we didn't feel like we were lost.
Yeah, I think that the main team itself was just about the perfect size. And I wonder if, as they introduce more and more characters, if I will feel less and less excited by the team as a unit, because like 4 plus Rogue, or I guess 5 if you include Professor X, 5 plus Rogue is like the perfect size. But when you start throwing Nightcrawler and Iceman and Kitty Pryde and Colossus, and then you're getting too many people, and you're like, yo, it's going to be too much. I won't get to spend enough time with each of the individual characters, which I would guess, with the exception of Wolverine, especially in these first ones, because he's the real like standout in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I look forward to watching X2 in my memory. It was my favorite of these, but it has been many years since I saw it. So I'll be curious to see how it ends up holding up.
Me too. I really enjoyed myself, and I'm very excited to see what the rest of this series has for me, because I remember X2 being a real high, and then you get to The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, and they are really, really bad. And then apparently they get good again, but maybe bad again. And then it gets really good with Logan, and then maybe the worst ever with Dark Phoenix. We'll see when we get there. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Well, I look forward to continuing to watch these and talk about them. And again, we look forward to recording and sharing this with people. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe if you haven't. Leave a rating. 5-star review would be great. Give us some feedback, feedback at themiddleofculture.com. And let us know if you've got any suggestions, comments, criticisms, and we'll look at them and then we'll decide what to do with them. I'm not going to make any more promises than that, but I'll look at them all for sure. At least there's that. And Braden, it's been a lot of fun watching this and talking about it with you, and I look forward to the next one.
I agree. I will just say really quick, a thing we never touched on. Bryan Singer is a sex pest. He can go to hell, but this movie was good anyway.
Yeah, I was, when it started up and his name popped up, I was like, oh, should I say something about that? And then I didn't write it down in my notes because I didn't want to take my nice little notebook that I was writing and put his name in it. And then so I kind of forgot. But yep, he's a scumbag. He's a dipshit. So yep, nope, that's all we're going to say.
Bad person who made some okay movies. This was one of them.
Correct.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
Okay. Talk to you in a few weeks. Bye.